I hate people who come on this board and belittle people who have had encounters with aliens and the paranormal and things like that. They are so quick to dismiss reality just because their life has always been spent stuck between four walls and because things don't align with their reality. I had an experience many years ago that I still remember like yesterday. To be frank, it ruined my life, and I'm at a point where I almost feel like it's beyond repair, like I will never be able to heal and move on. I will try and green text it. Be me. This happened around the mid-90s, when I was in my late teens/early 20s. I lived in a really remote community out in the Midwest. I don't want to say which in fear of doxing myself, but if I'm honest, I think it is mostly abandoned in the current year. I think most people had to move on due to the economy and people leaving for a better life and better opportunities. It was actually a really nice place to live. Everyone was pretty tight-knit and leaned on each other. It was almost idyllic, like how you imagine America should be. Anyway, I'm way too off topic. I was still young and had learned to drive quite recently. So my favorite hobby was just to drive around the area, sometimes going just that little bit further than last time and expanding my tiny world. The freedom it gave me felt otherworldly, and it just gave me a rush knowing I was getting further and further away from my little bubble and seeing things that I know I had never seen before. The world really was my oyster. The community I lived in was pretty developed, but had a lot of forests nearby that are pretty dense. Combine that with lots of rural roads that get narrow and windy and seem to go on forever, and you get some pretty unbelievable views. These were my favorite. It was like getting lost in another world. So this one morning I'm driving around really early. It must have been maybe 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., and I just wanted to get away for a couple of hours. So I picked a direction that I had barely explored, and I just drove. I had a Ford Escort that had seen better days. We're not especially wealthy, and as soon as I got too run down for my father to use for work, he picked up something else on the cheap and passed it down to me. He taught me as best as he could to fix things up and patch them to run just a little bit longer. It hadn't failed me so far. The sun was just barely in the sky, and I was driving down this really long stretch, forests on both sides, big towering trees, and it was like I was boxed in on both sides. I wasn't even driving very quickly because I like to take my time and take it all in. And then I hear this thump, and then I hear some kind of screeching. And before I know it, I can hear metal scraping against the asphalt and sparks flying up in front of me. And then I see one of my wheels rolling down ahead of me at maximum speed. All I can think is shit as I hit the brakes and pull over at the side of the road. I wasn't sure exactly how far out I was, and I did not have any phone with me. Poor from a rural community, so we didn't really have cell phones still in the 90s. I made a complete stop and pulled right over to the side of the road. I just watched as the wheels pick up momentum before slamming full force into a tree and causing it to tremble. Like, you could actually see the force of it. Then I heard the sounds of some birds flying away, and something kinda caught my eye. Something really dark, not super tall, but taller than say a dog or a wolf, it looked like, dropped down from one of the trees. I didn't really fully see it. It was incredibly fast and mostly blurry. I thought I was just imagining things, or maybe I knocked down a loose bit of bark or whatever. I am sitting there cursing under my breath, hoping the tools I have in my trunk would be enough to help me out. I got out and started inspecting where the tire had come off. I wasn't an expert by any means, but it looked like I had a lug nut missing, and the others were loose. Shit, this was probably completely my fault. I had been adjusting the wheel earlier that day, and in my haste to get away, I must have done a shitty job. Thankfully for me, it's fixable on the roadside, which saved me a hell of a walk. I started walking down the road to go and get the wheel. I wanted to get it over and done with. As I got about halfway down the road, I started to get this really funny feeling. My vision was starting to zoom in and out, if that makes sense. I instantly felt like I wanted to throw up and had this really anxious feeling. And the closer I got to the woods, the more sick I felt. I made a sprint back to my car but could not stop myself from vomiting on the side of the road. I got back in my car and sat for 5 minutes or so. I closed my eyes and tried to rest them and slow down my breathing. I had no idea what was wrong with my body. My eyes shot open when I heard the sounds of bark breaking off of a tree. I saw more birds fleeing into the sky, back in the direction that I came from. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but my tire was now fucking gone. I started to really focus my eyes on and zone in on the area. Now that the sun was starting to come out stronger, I thought I could see shadows coming from inside the forest. Then I saw what I thought could be trees were moving, just shuffling and swaying. But they weren't incredibly tall trees, like what made up most of the forest. And then I realized that the shade was much too dark, almost pure black. That sick feeling was starting to come back again, and I started to grow more and more afraid as these trees actually walked out of the forest and onto the road. There were two of them. The only way I could describe them as is long and gangly. Their arms hung down almost all the way down to their feet, and their legs were pretty long too. They must have stood at maybe around 6'5" or maybe 6'6". They just walked so oddly, really slowly and methodically, and seemed to be taking their time. They didn't have any eyes or facial features or anything like that I could make out. Just these long limbs accompanied with slender fingers and toes, but no features across the rest of their body. I could not tell if they were looking directly at me, but they were definitely walking toward me. They were dragging their feet a bit, and the walking motion was so awkward. I could feel my hands trembling on the wheel, and I had to actually slap myself to snap myself out of shock and actually move. They were slow now, but I did not know what they were truly capable of. And with no car, there is no way I would have been able to keep up a sustained sprint all the way home. So I did the best thing that I could think of, which was rushing to my trunk and grabbing a ball-peen hammer that had sat in there since my father gave the car to me. I did not own a gun. I'd been shooting with my dad before, but we only owned one firearm that my dad kept with him when working. What can I say? We were dirt poor. After I grabbed it and shut my trunk, I could see through my windshield that they were almost up on the car. They had started speed walking. They were no longer hunched over and dragging their feet with their knees bent. They had stood up straight and were preparing to do God knows what. I feel threatened, and like I have no choice. I decide that I need to make the first move here. I take the hammer into my hand and step forward, and use this step to put all of my weight into swinging it. I aim for the head of the one on the right who is slightly ahead of the other. I make contact with the head. I hear this pop that sounds gooey and wet. It sounded like jelly squelching, and I felt something hit my face. And in that moment, I noticed that the hammer was now wedged into this thing's head, like the head had not resisted any of the impact, and instead had just given way and absorbed it, and allowed it to pass through, if that makes sense. I tried to pull it back out, but it was just stuck, and this thing, whatever it was, put out a hand to reach for me. I let go of the hammer and fell onto my ass and tried to turn and scramble away. But before I knew it, I had two hands clamped firmly around my ankles. I tried to fight and to struggle, but this thing just picked me up by my ankles like I weighed nothing. I had to watch upside down as they carried me towards the forest to a tree near to where my tire hit. I had made myself dizzy from struggling, and that sick feeling was stronger than ever. This thing holds me upside down, up against the tree, and I watch as the other one approaches. He puts both hands out and reaches them towards me, and I feel a sharp pain go through each one of my ankles and another pop and squelching sound. I screamed out in pain, and the thing holding me let go and stepped back. I was confused at what was happening, but then I felt a couple of drops of blood hit my forehead. I had terrible core strength, so I could only lift myself slightly, but I saw that something completely black had been used to pierce both of my legs into the tree and hold me in place. At that moment, I think internally, I just kinda gave up on living, because I wasn't screaming or cursing or fighting anymore. I just started sobbing, really, really hard. I knew I was going to die to whoever or whatever these sick fucks were. It was weird though. They could have just killed me so easily. It was clear they had the strength, but they had strung me up and were just standing and watching me for what seemed like forever. I assumed they were watching me anyway, from the way that they would pace around me and touch different parts of my body. They would grab my arms and squeeze them, hold my eyelids open and poke my raw eye, which felt like it was burning afterwards. All I did was try to keep my eyes closed tightly and was just sobbing. After a period of silence and nothing happening, I felt 2 hands placed on my head. I opened my eyes up and one of them had 2 hands gripping near my forehead. It had this wide stance as it did so, and the grip was like a vice grip. I start to feel this pain, a really sharp pain. It's around my head, but it's so much worse than a headache. It feels like I'm burning up with a fever, all in a matter of seconds. And then I feel this insane pressure on my eyes. They feel like they are being grabbed and squeezed, and they are almost starting to throb. That's when I notice something about this thing. Its hands seem to be almost pulsing, like they have a heartbeat of their own. And I see something on its skin. It was completely black everywhere, not a single shade different. But as it gripped my head and I felt this pressure, I started to see something white enter into its hands. It was just a blob of pure white. It went into its fingers, onto the hands, and then worked its way down its arms. And it kept going on like this, traveling up its body, until it made its way to this thing's head, where the patch of white stayed. And then I saw it happen again, and again. Patch of white after white, all while this pressure grew more painful, and I felt like my eyeball was about to pop. I couldn't even hold back the screaming, it was pure agony. I was so distracted by the pain that it took me a minute or 2 to realize that my vision was starting to get blurry. On the right half of my vision, the details of the world were starting to blur. It was like the color was being sucked out of them. The bright blue sky, the brown of the tree bark, the green of the leaves and foliage. They all started to become out of focus and fade to a gray, before eventually, the vision on that side went completely black. I heard one last pop and squelch, and the pressure in my eyes instantly just fades, and this thing removes its hands from me. I'm shaking and in complete shock, just wondering what the fuck happened to me. The blob of white skin in this thing's head starts to move around, and it starts to almost pulse, like a heartbeat again, and grow. And I watch as the skin starts to sink in around the top of its face, and I watch as the skin rips, and I see a white bulge growing out of this rip. And I start to feel vomit rising in my throat as an eye, a human fucking eye, starts to look back at me. The same iris color as my eye, only it's in its forehead instead of where an eye should be. And this thing just stares at me while using it, analyzing me, looking me up and down. And he turns to the other creature, and the other creature starts to poke it and tilts its head to the side like it's fascinated. At this point I am just hoping to wake up, hoping I am just trapped in some sick and twisted nightmare. I'm feeling sick just typing this to the point where I don't think I have the energy to green text it anymore. The other thing, which I'm still not sure what the fuck to call them, put its hands on my forehead just like the other. The same pain and pressure in my head, but stronger. Thankfully not in my eyes this time, but I can feel it in other parts of my body. In my wrists, in my chest, in my throat, and it stings so badly that I just can't hold back the tears. I see something red flowing into its palms as they vibrate just like before. It flows around its body, but it doesn't morph into anything or stay on its body. After flowing around its limbs and then up to its head, it just disappears. As it's doing this, I feel like I am growing more lightheaded and on the verge of passing out. Just thinking about anything at this point is causing me a great deal of trouble and pain. While before I was trying to be in my happy place, to think about driving around, to think about hunting with my dad, to think about my mom teaching me how to drive. I now can't. It hurts too much. Trying to think about all these things at all becomes harder and harder until I just forget to. And then, somehow, it got even worse. This thing starts speaking. It wasn't directed at me, at least I don't think so. It was just pure broken English, just a random assortment of words. Something like cow, farm, meat, drink, milk. Just basic words like this, but less connected than that. Just pure nonsense. The other thing begins to put its hands on my head too, and before long, it is doing the same thing. I am barely conscious at this point, and everything is just fading in and out, and really does feel more like a dream than reality. But as the minutes go by, and this could just be made up by my brain that was on the verge of passing out and thought it was going to die, but they started to make more sense. I could have sworn at one point, just before I hit lights out, that the thing with the eye turned and looked at the other and said, "We need more." When I came to, I was in a hospital about an hour away. Doctor told me I was very lucky and that a driver had found me just in the nick of time. Said I had a really weak heartbeat and that if I was left any longer, I might not have made it. They had a hard time figuring out what was wrong with me. I was in a coma for a month and my memories were mashed potatoes by the time I woke up. It wasn't total amnesia, but I forgot a lot of basic things about myself and my life. I had forgotten basic motor skills, and they had to give me physical therapy for months before I could walk again. The doctor's diagnosis for me was pretty cut and dry. They had one working theory, and since I didn't want to mention what actually happened, for fearing of being institutionalized, I went along with it. My eyeball was gone, missing from my skull, like it was just plucked out. They told me I had been attacked, but they were clueless as to how my eye was actually lost in the ensuing struggle. There weren't any signs of blunt force trauma, no scratches or signs of a knife or other weapon being used to remove it. They suspected that I had been knocked out and it had been extracted medically, but at the side of the road by what were presumably criminals or traffickers. They had no idea how it was done so cleanly. The police were clueless as to the purpose. They asked why they wouldn't just take me whole, why they didn't take other parts of me. They knew that something was up, but I just had to play dumb. I mean, what else could I fucking do? They found what was left of my car. I told them the story about losing my wheel, but they never found it anywhere nearby. My car was ripped to shreds. All the seats were torn or pulled out. Someone had gone in there and pulled out the gear stick by pure force, and my car keys were bent almost completely. All of my tools were missing from the back too. I don't know why those things would do that. Unless they were intelligent enough to know that it would make it look less suspicious. That thought scares the heck out of me. There is one other thing too. When I woke up, I couldn't talk. They had to do surgery on my vocal cords because they were damaged in a way that they couldn't really explain. It took a long time for them to heal and for me to be able to talk again. To this day, my voice sounds nothing like it did, and you can still hear how weak it is. My throat gets dry really quickly, and I can't talk for long or very quickly. You might not believe me, but that's the story of how an alien encounter ruined my life. I can't think of any other thing to call them. After that, I was a wreck and a shut-in. I never went driving again. I locked myself in my room. I would not go outside. I just straight up refused to talk to people. I prefer to stay inside my house, because it's the only place I felt safe, where I felt comfortable. It's the only place where I felt like they would just not appear and try to get me again. I am deathly afraid of the outside now. I think, if I'm being honest, my parents would have preferred if I never woke up from that coma. I'm a fucking disappointment. All I do is sit in this room and drink and eat and use this stupid computer and watch TV. I am almost 50 years old and I've done nothing with my life. My parents are barely still alive, and yet I still don't get off my ass and help them because I am scared to go outside. When they are gone, I will have nothing and no one, and I can't help but feel if I didn't encounter those things that day, then I would not be like this at all. Please someone tell me they have an explanation for this. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. I was around 17 years old in South Carolina, driving up from Charleston to Dorchester for a party with a friend of mine named Kyle. I was the driver and he was the passenger. Now, I lived in South Carolina for 7 years, and spent another 6 in Sevierville, Tennessee prior to that, and I was in love with the wilderness. Nothing creepy had ever happened in all that time, regardless of how rural or backwoods I had gotten. So, driving up there, the hour got late. We were on a stretch of lonely road with nothing but woods and swamp on either side of the road. No buildings, no houses, and no real civilization for around 40 miles ahead and behind us. Conversation was typical 17-year-old dude conversation. Dude, we're gonna get so wasted, dude. I haven't seen these guys in forever, dude. And so on and so forth. I have my eyes on the road, however, in order to make sure I don't slam into some random wildlife crossing by. With no lights in the woods, at 1:30 in the morning, visibility was fairly shitty. As I'm talking, I spot something around 500 feet up the road, walking along the side of the pavement towards our car. As my mind is on driving and convo, my first thought on the figure was probably some hitchhiker or maybe someone's car broke down. However, as soon as I heard how strange both of those possibilities sound, I started to watch the figure more closely. It's 1:40 in the morning now, middle of the fucking woods, with no civilization for dozens of miles in either direction, and the road is one way. I haven't passed a car or seen another car in over an hour. Conversation slows down as the figure gets closer. I realize something isn't quite right, because it's way too tall. Now that it's closer, I am 5'10", and my friend was 6'1" and 245 pounds. But this thing had to have been 8 foot at least, and the body proportions were wrong. The arms dangled far below the hip, with human-esque hands with way too long fingers. I could not make out claws, but who knows? It was dark. The head was bald. The skin was pale gray-white, like a maggot, and mottled brown splotches, which may have been dirt or natural coloration, were mixed in. The eyes were black, large, and reflected light in a predatory way when the truck's lamp shone on them. The legs were bent oddly at the knees, but were quite long nonetheless. I couldn't make out the feet, but the hands were humanish, so I presume the feet were too. The worst part was the mouth. Imagine a human mouth where the lower jaw has been stretched and distended all the way down to the chest. The teeth were yellow and sharp. The mouth was red, but had no visible tongue lolling around. Conversation stopped dead. I flicked the high beams on, as it seemed to be quickening pace as we approached, moving in a very jerky and halting manner. And when the high beams hit, it shrieked in a weird, two-toned way, and made to move across the road. Which was bad, because my reaction had been to slam on the accelerator in order to pass the thing by. We locked eyes as I approached, and I introduced that gray-skinned motherfucker to a Ford F-150, doing about 70. When we collided, everybody screamed. Me, Kyle, and Stretch Armstrong. And the thing made a pleasingly solid foom upon impact with the right corner of the hood and bumper. The shrieking stopped abruptly and turned into a squalling moan, and the impact sent it hurtling into a tree on the roadside. We kept going. There was no blood and only minor damage to the truck. I love steel. As we passed it, I told him to check our 6, and he said, "It's down. I can see its legs. It's not moving." I nodded once and stayed quiet for another 5 minutes. My friend, who was used to being a badass and playing high school football on the D-line, was visibly shaken. He was in his seat and was hyperventilating. I drove the rest of the way in silence, got to the party, said hi so I could get through the door, locked myself in the bathroom, looked myself in the mirror, and probably cried for about 15 minutes. I have no clue what road it was on. I live in Miami now, and I am 27. I don't really care whether anyone believes me. I know what I saw, and I saw it way before I even heard 4chan existed or knew what a skinwalker was. I was a huge nerd, very much into D&D and other crap, so part of my issue was trying to figure out what fucking monster I even saw. It didn't seem to match the description of anything I'd ever heard of. All I knew was, it wasn't human, and we gave it a black eye in exchange for a dented hood and scratched paint, so I knew it was solid and not some kind of ghost or hallucination. I actually decided to share the story because some of the skinwalker posts have mentioned them as being grey-skinned naked men, which synced up exactly with what I saw. It's actually comforting to know other people have encountered them, and I hope it comforts people who have encountered them, To know that they don't seem to enjoy being broadsided by 3 tons of steel at 70 miles per hour. Dude, you probably killed a normal person. That's fucked up. Let me guess, no one ever found the corpse or any other sign of it. If it was a person, they are dead now. Sucks for them. But they deserved it for wandering around in an 8-foot-tall studio-quality costume with a built-in voice distorter at 1:40 a.m. on a deserted road. What did they think was going to happen? Get picked up and taken to the party in exchange for a blowjob? Too implausible. Some weird, undocumented thing hanging out and preying on people living on the fringe of society. Sounds scarier, but more reasonable to me. The fact that this thing found our little encounter unpleasant suggests they may be a big problem for solo humans, but 10 or 20 or 30, heavily armed and armored, combat ready, with vehicular backup. If a civvy vehicle can put it on its ass, I bet human firepower and superior numbers could make sure it never got up again. And maybe they're not smart enough to understand our technology, but smart enough to do what most predators do. Go after the stragglers, and nibble at the corners of the herd, not the herd itself. After all, stampedes can kill a lion, no problem. No idea about the body. For all I know, it may have been killed by the impact. I never looked back. All my pal said was, it's down and it's not moving, and that was good enough for me. Yeah, but if you recovered the corpse later, you could have been famous. But if it was a hostile creature, you did everyone else a favor by killing it, nonetheless. It was near Holly Hill. For what it's worth, I don't believe these things are supernatural. I believe they're flesh and blood, with capabilities largely unknown because no one has ever captured one. Judging by the weird, coppery metallic rotten egg smell on the hood. Yeah, I fucking smelled it to see if there was anything to smell. And judging by the fact that both Skinwalker stories and stories about skunk apes, Bigfoot, etc. are all frequently accompanied by bad smells, which are generally uniform in description, I suspect they may be all the same thing, or perhaps different subspecies. Large, forest-dwelling, predatory, intelligent, good at hiding, afraid or weary of technology, and apparently capable of assuming different shapes. I rest easy in the knowledge that deforestation will root them out and reveal them, eventually. Until then, my main curiosity is over what their motivation is. Why do they copy humans and take over their lives like the changelings and doppelgangers in old stories? Are they on par with human intelligence, or not as bright? This is the one blatantly paranormal thing that has ever happened to me, and it's not so hard for me to fit it into my worldview. If something is not widely known to a society, which thinks it knows everything already, they tend to dismiss it as fable. No way in hell would I have stopped, gotten out, and checked to see if it was dead. Think about it. If it was alive, it would be pissed, and I'd be an unarmed 17-year-old in the dark, versus something that could survive a collision with a truck. If it was seemingly dead, and I tried to load it into the truck, and it turned out it was just taking a nap, I am fucked once again. My life was more important to me than possible fame, and on top of that, priority number 1 was putting as much distance between me and that thing as possible. If you'd seen the thing's face and mouth, and the sheer size and way it moved, it didn't exactly scream friendly. It screamed, but I didn't even hear friendly once. What I heard was, I'm going to come over there and make your insides come out where they can't do you any good. I wasn't even trying to run it over with the truck. The road was narrow, I had no room to swerve. I made to pass by it, it made to cut me off, and I guess I ended up regretting it. Last year, a drive-by shooting happens at the gas station. One person dies, an elderly lady, a very kind lady. A lot of people in the area respect her, as she always helped who she could in the community. I swear, this isn't the intro to the Four Brothers. People say you can see/feel her spirit, lurking, and hear weird shit. One of the clerks swears up and down he's seen her more than once after closing before he drove off. Late last Thursday, I just landed in town on holiday exodus from Fort Benning. Want to buy a Mountain Dew and a pack of smokes, as I have not had any in months. Just closing time. However, the clerk recognized me and hooked me up as he is just about to end his night. Help him take out the trash and return. He shuts lights off and we begin walking outside. We both hear very clearly from the inside. Have a blessed night. He says shit like that happens regularly during closing. People avoid talking about it though, since it is still a sensitive issue, and they don't want to attract late night attention for people looking for spooks. Apparently, whenever you feel her looking around, it's like a good vibe just jolts into you. I don't know about all of that though.